The late 17th century was a period of incredible maritime opportunity and staggering risk. The world's oceans were highways of commerce connecting empires, and the most lucrative route of all ran through the Indian Ocean. Here, the wealth of the Mughal Empire flowed westward. Every year, a grand fleet made the annual pilgrimage voyage from Surat to Mecca and then on to Jeddah, carrying wealthy Muslim pilgrims returning from Mecca. More importantly, for the European powers and the pirates who shadowed them, these ships also carried the year's accumulation of imperial tribute and trade profits. They were floating banks, and the grandest of them all was the Ganj-i-Sawai. Its name translates roughly to exceeding treasure, and it was not an exaggeration. The ship was a massive, well-armed vessel belonging to the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb himself. It was commanded by one of his trusted admirals and protected by dozens of heavy cannon and hundreds of soldiers. For a pirate, the Ganj-i-Sawai was not merely a target, it was the ultimate prize, a symbol of such immense power and wealth that most considered it untouchable. Its very reputation was its primary defense. To even contemplate an attack was considered an act of madness or supreme arrogance. Yet, in the late summer of 1696, one man decided to attempt the impossible. That man was Henry Avery, also known as John Avery, Long Ben, or simply the Arch-Pirate. His origins are somewhat obscure, but trial records and contemporary accounts suggest he was born around 1659 and had a long career at sea before turning to piracy. He had served in the Royal Navy, participated in the bombardment of Algiers, and worked as a merchant sailor and a privateer. This diverse experience gave him a deep understanding of ships, navigation, and naval combat. By the early 1690s, he was the first mate aboard the Times Charles II, a 30-gun privateer vessel chartered by Spain to harass French shipping in the Caribbean. The venture was plagued by delays and unpaid wages, breeding deep resentment among the crew. In May of 1694, that resentment boiled over. With the Spanish paymasters absent and the crew near mutiny, Avery and his confederates seized their chance. They overpowered the few loyal officers, locked the captain in his cabin, and took command of the ship, renaming it the Times Fancy. Avery was elected captain by the rebellious crew. They immediately set sail for the Indian Ocean, a decision that reveals Avery's ambition. He was not interested in small prizes or coastal raiding. He was aiming for the main artery of global wealth. The Times, Fancy Times, was fast, a quality Avery prioritized, and he made for the Cape of Good Hope, intent on intercepting the Mughal pilgrimage fleet. He was not just a desperate sailor turning pirate, he was a strategic planner targeting the single richest convoy on the planet. As the Times Fancy Times sailed east, Avery stood on the quarterdeck, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The sun beat down on his weathered face, and the sea spray carried the cries of gulls. He was a man consumed by his vision, driven by a desire for wealth and glory. His crew, a motley assembly of sailors and soldiers, looked up to him with a mixture of awe and trepidation. They knew that they were embarked on a perilous journey, one that would either make them rich beyond their wildest dreams or send them to a watery grave. His journey east was a recruitment drive. He stopped at the island of Johanna in the Comoros, a known pirate haven, and issued a bold proclamation. He offered safe harbor and equal shares to any sailor who would join his crew, pledging to make them all rich men. His reputation and the obvious quality of the Times, Fancy Times attracted scores of men from other pirate vessels and disaffected merchant sailors. By the time he reached the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the gateway to the Red Sea, in August of 1696, Avery commanded a small flotilla of pirate ships and a hardened, loyal crew. They were now lying in wait, hidden among the islands and inlets, for the specific moment when the Mughal fleet, with the Ganj-i-Sawai at its heart, would sail into their trap. This was not a random act of piracy. It was a carefully planned military operation aimed at the very pinnacle of maritime wealth. "We will make our fortunes here," Avery declared to his crew, his voice carrying across the water. "The Mughal Empire is rich and complacent, and we will be the ones to take advantage of it." His men cheered, their spirits high with anticipation. They knew that they were about to embark on the adventure of a lifetime, one that would either make them legends or condemn them to obscurity. The fate of the Ganj-i-Sawai and the riches it carried hung in the balance, waiting to be decided by the bravery and cunning of Henry Avery and his crew. The historical record on Henry Avery's early life is frustratingly thin. No definitive birth certificate or childhood diary exists. He emerges from the fog of the late 17th century as a fully formed seaman, his past a collection of plausible stories. Popular accounts suggest he participated in the English fleet's bombardment of Algiers in 1671. This naval action was a punitive expedition against the notorious Barbary corsairs who preyed upon European shipping. If Avery was there, it would have been a brutal introduction to maritime warfare and the economics of plunder on a grand scale. Other tales place him in the Caribbean, engaging in the chaotic world of buccaneering, where European outlaws operated with semi-legal letters of marque against Spanish holdings. He may have even captained a logwood freighter in the Bay of Campeche, a tedious but profitable trade in dyewood. These fragments paint a picture of a man who knew the sea, understood violence, and was intimately familiar with the blurred lines between legitimate commerce and outright piracy. By 1693, Henry Avery found himself serving as first mate on the British ship Charles II. The vessel had been chartered by the Spanish government for a specific purpose. Spain was embroiled in the 9 Years' War against France, and the Charles II was contracted to trade, supply arms to Spanish colonies, and legally raid French vessels in the Caribbean. For the crew, this meant wages and a share of any prizes taken. It was a legitimate privateering operation. The ship sat in the Spanish port of Corunna for months, however, as payments from the Spanish crown were delayed. The crew grew restless, then mutinous. They were far from home, their promised pay was not materializing, and the prospect of a long, dangerous voyage for a bankrupt employer lost its appeal. In the spring of 1694, the discontent boiled over. The captain was ashore. Avery, as first mate, was the senior officer on board. He did not suppress the mutiny. He joined it. With the support of the crew, Henry Avery seized the Charles II. He renamed it the Fancy, a symbolic act of casting off its old, frustrating identity. Avery was elected captain by the men who had followed him into rebellion. Their plan was audacious. They would not linger in the Atlantic. Instead, they set a course for the Indian Ocean, a realm of legendary wealth far from the crowded and contested waters of the Caribbean. European ships were a rare sight there, dominated by the powerful navies and merchant fleets of the Mughal Empire and various East India companies. It was a high-risk, high-reward theatre. The Fancy rounded the southern tip of Africa, stopping at the pirate haven of Madagascar to take on supplies and perhaps recruit more desperate men. Avery then sailed north into the Arabian Sea, entering the busy shipping lanes between India and the Red Sea. His target was the annual pilgrimage fleet, the massive convoy carrying Muslim faithful to Mecca. More importantly, it carried the wealth of the subcontinent back toward the Mughal court. In September of 1695, Avery's Fancy, now accompanied by several other pirate vessels that had joined his venture, lay in wait near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. They spotted their quarry, the massive fleet of the Grand Mughal, returning from the Hajj. It was a formidable armada, but Avery identified a straggler. The Fateh Muhammad, a sizable merchant ship, fell behind the main group. Avery's squadron captured it with relative ease. The loot was substantial, but it was merely an appetizer. The main prize was still on the horizon. 2 days later, the pirates sighted the Ganj-i-Sawai, the flagship of the Mughal fleet. It was one of the largest ships in Indian waters, armed with dozens of cannons and carrying hundreds of soldiers and crew. A direct assault seemed suicidal, but Avery had a gambit. He ordered the Fancy to close rapidly, relying on speed and maneuverability. As the ships drew near, one of the Ganj-i-Sawai's own cannons exploded on deck, either from a misfire or a well-aimed shot from the Fancy. The resulting chaos and carnage aboard the Mughal ship broke the defenders' discipline. The pirates swarmed aboard. After several hours of fierce close-quarters combat, the Ganj-i-Sawai was theirs. Avery now stood on the deck of the richest prize ever taken by pirates, the scale of which would echo through history and send shockwaves across empires. In September of 1695, the Indian Ocean was a vast and contested stage. The pirate captain Henry Avery sailed aboard his flagship, the Fancy. His target was the annual pilgrimage fleet bound from Surat to the Red Sea. a convoy carrying wealthy Mughal nobles returning from Mecca. He knew the richest prize sailed among them, the Ganj-i-Sawai, a massive ship armed with dozens of guns and manned by hundreds of soldiers and sailors. Avery's plan was not a complex naval ambush, but a patient, predatory hunt. He spent weeks stalking the convoy, waiting for the moment when the ships would become separated by the wind or by nightfall. His moment came on the 7th of September. The Ganj-i-Sawai, despite its might, had fallen slightly behind the main fleet. Avery gave the order to close the distance. The Fancy was a fast vessel, specially modified for speed. It closed on the Mughal treasure ship like a shark. The initial exchange of cannon fire was fierce. The Ganj-i-Sawai's gunners returned fire, and one of the first shots from the Mughal ship reportedly struck the Fancy's mainmast. The damage, however, was not fatal. Avery's crew pressed the attack, their own cannons roaring. The key to the pirates' tactics was not an overwhelming broadside, but a psychological and physical shock. After the initial barrage, the Fancy drew alongside the larger vessel. Grappling hooks flew through the air, biting into the Ganj-i-Sawai's wooden rails. Avery's men, a hardened and desperate crew, swarmed over the side. They were met by the ship's guards and soldiers. The fighting on the deck was brutal and close quarters. According to later accounts, the pirates used grenades and small arms to break the defenders' formations. The chaos was immense. Some reports suggest a lucky shot from the Fancy's guns early in the engagement struck the Ganj-i-Sawai's mainmast as well, crippling its ability to maneuver or flee. Whether by chance or design, the Mughal ship's greatest defense, its size and armament, was neutralized by a combination of aggression and a single, devastating hit. Within hours, the resistance was crushed. The pirates secured the ship. What they found below decks surpassed even their most avaricious dreams. The vessel was a floating treasury. The hold and the private cabins of the wealthy passengers were filled with chests. These chests contained gold and silver coins, minted in various empires. The total haul was later estimated by English authorities to be worth between £325,000 and £600,000 sterling. Contemporary records break this down into more tangible terms, describing some 500,000 gold and silver pieces. Beyond the coins were jeweled ornaments, silver cups, fine textiles, and other luxuries intended for the Mughal court. The capture was not merely a theft, it was a direct insult to one of the world's most powerful empires. The Ganj-i-Sawai was not just any merchant vessel. It was a ship of state, carrying nobles and pilgrims under the emperor's protection. Its seizure sent a shockwave through the Mughal administration. The immediate impact was diplomatic fury. The Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb was incensed. He held the English East India Company responsible for the actions of English pirates, despite the company's protestations that Avery was an outlaw. In retaliation, Aurangzeb ordered the closure of several East India Company factories in India and arrested their officials. The company's trade, a vital source of revenue, was suddenly in grave peril. This political crisis forced the English government, which had previously turned a blind eye to piracy, to take unprecedented action. A massive international manhunt for Henry Avery was launched, with a substantial bounty placed on his head. For the pirates, the capture was the ultimate score. It transformed Avery from a successful captain into a legendary figure, a pirate king whose name was whispered from London to Calcutta. The treasure was divided among the crew, with some men receiving shares worth a lifetime of honest wages. The Ganj-i-Sawai's capture proved that even the most powerful naval force could be vulnerable to a single, determined predator. It was a lesson that would haunt the Mughals and redefine the threat of piracy in the Indian Ocean for years to come. The capture of the Ganj-i-Sawai sent shockwaves that traveled far beyond the warm waters of the Indian Ocean, reaching the cold stone corridors of power in London and Delhi. For the British government, the event was an immediate and profound diplomatic crisis. The Mughal Empire was not a distant, weak kingdom, but a colossal economic partner, a source of immense wealth for the burgeoning British East India Company. The news that English pirates had attacked one of the empire's grandest ships, a vessel carrying members of the royal family and pilgrims, ignited a fury in Emperor Aurangzeb. Seated within the Red Fort, the aging emperor saw the assault as a direct insult to Mughal sovereignty and a violation of the safe passage traditionally granted to pilgrim ships. His response was swift and severe. He ordered the immediate seizure of East India Company factories across his territories and threatened to expel all English traders permanently. This action threatened to sever Britain's most lucrative trade route, a potential death blow to its commercial ambitions in the East. The Crown, reeling from the potential economic catastrophe, moved with unprecedented speed to disavow the pirates. Henry Avery and his crew were declared enemies of mankind, a legal term that placed them outside the protection of any nation. The government issued the first known worldwide wanted posters, offering a king's ransom for their capture, a reward of £500 for Avery himself, a sum equivalent to decades of wages for a common sailor. This aggressive public pursuit marked a decisive turning point. European states had often tolerated, or even quietly encouraged, privateers who blurred the lines between legal warfare and outright piracy. The Ganj-i-Sawai incident made that ambiguity untenable. The hunt for Avery catalyzed a new, more coordinated international effort to combat piracy as naval powers realized that unchecked predators could destabilize the entire system of global trade upon which their empires were being built. Amidst the political storm, the man at its center simply vanished. Henry Avery, now the most wanted pirate in the world, disappeared from the historical record. Despite the global manhunt and the substantial reward, he was never captured. His ultimate fate remains one of history's great unsolved mysteries. Contemporary rumors swirled. Some said he sailed to the Bahamas, using his wealth to bribe officials and live quietly. Others claimed he returned to his native England or Ireland under an assumed name. More fantastical tales suggested he established a pirate kingdom on Madagascar. What is certain is that his successful heist cemented his legendary status. In England, he was transformed into a folk hero. Ballads celebrated Captain Avery as a daring champion who outwitted the powerful and claimed a fortune from a mighty empire. In the taverns of Port Royal and the coves of the Caribbean, his story was told and retold, inspiring a generation of men to turn pirate. The tale of the Ganj-i-Sawai represented the ultimate, attainable fantasy. A single, spectacular act of piracy could liberate a crew from a life of hardship forever. This dream influenced pirate articles and shares for decades, with every crew hoping for their own Ganj-i-Sawai moment, a chance to strike it rich and retire. The scale of the treasure itself is difficult to overstate. Estimates drawn from East India Company reports and contemporary accounts place the total haul at between £325,000 and £600,000 sterling. To put that in perspective, the entire annual revenue of the Kingdom of England at the time was only about £2 million. This was a fortune that dwarfed the treasuries of many European monarchs. Adjusted for inflation, the lower estimate equates to well over $100 million today. Yet, the raw monetary figure only tells part of the story. The loot was meticulously catalogued by the pirates themselves as they divided their plunder. It included some 500,000 gold and silver coins, primarily Mughal rupees and gold mohurs. But it also contained jeweled ornaments, ceremonial weapons inlaid with precious stones, silver cups and plates, and religious artifacts. This was not just wealth, it was the cultural and ceremonial wealth of the Mughal court, a direct pillaging of the empire's prestige. The loss of such a vast portion of its annual trade revenue was a severe financial blow, but the symbolic insult was far deeper, demonstrating a humiliating vulnerability. The legacy of the Ganj-i-Sawai endures because the event functions as a clear historical hinge. It represents the absolute peak of individual pirate ambition, the dream of the one big score. Simultaneously, it triggered the beginning of the end for that very dream. The intense diplomatic backlash forced European states to systematically dismantle the permissive environment that allowed piracy to flourish. Stronger naval patrols, anti-piracy statutes, and international agreements followed. For historians, the incident provides a stark snapshot of 17th century globalization, where the actions of a few dozen men on a single ship could strain relations between empires and reshape maritime law. The enduring fascination lies in this potent combination: an almost impossibly audacious crime, a vanished king of pirates, and a treasure of mythic proportions. The Ganj-i-Sawai remains the definitive benchmark, the richest treasure ship ever captured by pirates, against which all other hauls are measured. Its story is where verified history and enduring legend permanently fused, a testament to a fleeting moment when the oceans were wide, empires were vulnerable, and fortune awaited the boldest sailors on the horizon.